received a number of complaints in my most recent server unboxing, featuring the HPE DL80 Gen 9 2U 12-bay server. Things like, hey, doesn't HP charge ludicrous service contracts for drivers and firmware downloads? Or, I'll never buy an HP product because they don't let you download anything. Or, my personal favorite, hey, you want to download a BIOS? I got a guy. Today, we're going to dive into HP ProLiant servers. What does HP paywall behind contracts? What's available directly off their website? And should you buy an HP server for your home lab or small business? You know what always has up-to-date firmware? Today's video sponsor, Linode. If you've ever thought about running your own servers for home or business use, but don't want to deal with the headache of maintaining hardware, why not let Linode host your services for you? They make it simple to deploy and manage your own cloud infrastructure, with solutions ranging from a single shared CPU to massive multi-core virtual machines. You can even add in dedicated enterprise GPUs for machine learning and graphics rendering. With shared CPU plans starting at as little as $5 per month and scaling up to as high as you need to go, you'll be able to find a hosting plan that fits your needs. They also have 24/7 365 support available regardless of your plan size. That's a better support plan than I have on my personal server rack, I can tell you that much. Visit linode.com/craftcomputing and get a $100 60-day credit just for signing up for a new account, and get your personal or business cloud started today. That's linode.com/craftcomputing, and thanks again to them for sponsoring today's video. Welcome back to Craft Computing, everyone. As always, I'm Jeff. When it comes to servers for home lab and small business use, Hewlett-Packard hasn't done themselves any favors in the way of positive press. I received a couple dozen comments on my most recent unboxing video with the HP DL80 Gen 9 server last week, all of them saying pretty much the same thing, and that is HP doesn't let you download BIOS or firmware updates unless you have a current support subscription. Some comments even went as far to claim that there are no driver downloads available as well. Now, part of this is true, part of it's patently false, and like everything, the truth is somewhere in the middle, but buried by misinformation on both sides. Today, I'm going to look at exactly what HP offers for download when it comes to their server products, and whether or not you should consider an HP box for your next small business or home lab server purchase. So when did all of this start? Back in 2014, Hewlett-Packard was looking to shake up their internal business, including announcing they were splitting into two separate companies, Hewlett-Packard and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. As part of this split, HP Enterprise was likely looking for new revenue sources within their already existing product stacks. And what's the easiest way to get your already paying customers to pay more money? Start charging things that you previously gave away for free. Firmware updates were then placed behind a paywall, forcing you to buy an expensive support plan from HPE to keep your system BIOS up to date. While HP claimed the policy, quote, aligns with industry best practices, it not only soured relationships at the time, it also led to the gut reaction comments that I received last week. And I'd like to note here that Dell, Supermicro, hell, even Cisco have all of their server BIOS and firmware packages available on their site for download. No login required and no service plan to buy. First, let's go over exactly what HPE's current policy is. Quote, access to HPE support materials requires support validation for ProLiant Gen 9 and prior generations, including downloads available on HPE Support Center for BIOS system ROM and complex programmable logic devices. HPE only requires you to log in to your HPE Passport account for ProLiant servers, Gen 10 and future generations of Service Pack for ProLiant or individual components. Support validation is not required for ILO controller components, either embedded or external to the system board, drivers, or any other download content in the drivers, software, and firmware section of HPESC. Critical related firmware updates addressing safety or security fixes will be made available to all ProLiant customers outside of warranty or support contracts. So according to HPE's policy, if you have a Gen 10 or newer ProLiant server, all BIOS and firmware updates are actually available free of charge, without a service contract or even an HPE login. What is not available are the HPE update rollups or Service Pack ISOs. These packages update all BIOS, firmware, and software packages on an HP ProLiant server with a single click, eliminating the need for individual software downloads. To check out this policy, let's take a look at a support page from one of HP's more recent systems. The ProLiant DL325 Gen 10, a server released a little over 3 years ago, does appear to require a service plan for the ProLiant Service Pack, as mentioned in the policy above. Looking at the BIOS download page though, all 4 packages listed on the page are in fact available to download without a support plan, the most recent being posted literally the day before I shot this video. The same seems to apply to firmware updates to all components and optional parts listed on the support page as well, which includes everything from the NVIDIA Tesla T4 GPU to InfiniBand cards, 10 and 40 gigabit network adapters, drive backplanes, even HBA and RAID controllers. It seems the one-click upgrade, available through the ProLiant Service Pack ISO, is not attainable without a contract, but individual device drivers, firmware, and system BIOS upgrades are downloadable from the site for free. So, not the best policy, as it will make more work for technicians to upgrade systems to the current versions, but also not the end of the world because the packages are still available. But what about Hewlett-Packard's announcement from back in 2014 proclaiming that all BIOS and firmware upgrades that were deemed non-critical would be locked behind a paywall? Well, that still kind of exists, and that's where the story gets a little bit more complicated. In that original announcement, HP stated that all BIOS and firmware updates would only be available, quote, to customers with a valid warranty, care pack service, or support agreement. This decision reinforces our goal to provide access to the latest HP firmware, which is a valuable intellectual property, for our customers who have chosen to maximize and protect their IT investments. We know this is a change from how we've done business in the past. However, this aligns with industry best practices and is the right decision for our customers and partners. I think they missed a point at the end, and that was their bottom line. That announcement, by the way, came with only 2 weeks' notice before the policy went into effect. Outrage was fairly universal at the time, with many news outlets bashing HP for the sudden and dramatic policy shift, especially given the large number of customers that were potentially being left out to dry. So, something obviously changed between 2014 and 2021, as HPE does allow downloads of BIOS and firmware updates for Gen 10 and newer servers. But are they still blocking downloads for earlier systems? Unfortunately, yes. Rewinding to last week, let's check out the download page for my HPE DL80 Gen 9 server, and find out what's available and what's not, starting with the system BIOS. At the time of filming, there are 6 packages available with BIOS updates, with the most recent one being just 5 weeks old. Unfortunately, not a single one is obtainable without a support contract. Not exactly a great start here. What about firmware for various components? One of the other popular comments in the unboxing video were suggesting I upgrade the firmware for the ILO4 chip, as HPE removed Java and introduced HTML5 support, bringing IPMI into the modern day. The most recent version of the ILO4 firmware is from May 2021, so a little over 2 months old. And what's better, the file is in fact available for download. How about the P840 RAID controller? Yes, version 7.0b was released in October 2020, and is also available for download. The same is true for fiber channel cards, onboard gigabit network adapters, and every other device that could possibly be included with the HP DL80 Gen 9. And it seems the device drivers I searched are also readily available. So, what's the full story here? When HPE spun off from Hewlett-Packard, the idea of locking BIOS updates behind a paywall was not well received by customers. But like their idol Cisco, they decided to press on and not worry about the negative attention and potential loss of customers because of this shift. And it's hard to objectively say that this was a bad decision for them. Since their official split in late 2015, HPE shares are up 40%, even after a dramatic plummet in March of 2020. Because it was March of 2020. Not a bad return to shareholders in a little over 5 years. But focusing purely on the consumer side of this decision, taking a steaming pile on your current and future customers to pick up a couple dimes isn't the most endearing quality in a company. And while current generation servers are no longer bound by this paywall for BIOS updates, products previous to 2018 still are. Keeping systems up to date should be the de facto standard for manufacturers for hardware designed to be ran for more than 5, 8, or even 10 plus years. Hell, even Chromebooks get a guaranteed 8 years of support from Google. And seeing as how HPE is still providing driver and firmware updates to systems that were produced in 2010, it's fair to say that consumer expectations for HP to patch critical vulnerabilities is entirely reasonable. Anyone remember Spectre and Meltdown? You know, the exploits that affected mainly virtual server environments by taking advantage of flaws in speculative execution to read active cache memory off the CPU? That was disclosed in November of 2019. The servers that were most affected by it? You guessed it, everything prior to HPE's Gen 10 ProLiants. The lack of security updates for servers that are barely 3 or 4 years old is entirely unacceptable. Server refurbishers exist because small and medium businesses are the exact customers who can't afford 4- and 5-figure service contracts for their 2 or 3 physical servers. And a lack of security updates will only lead to one of two places, either unpatched servers running in the wild, or an early grave for otherwise usable hardware. While I'm glad that HP Enterprise has seemingly reversed course as of their Gen 10 systems, it is still incredibly disappointing to see they are sticking to their service contract guns on systems that cost less than a service contract itself would. It's anti-consumer, it's anti-security, and HP has well earned that reputation, and that is, don't buy our products if you want to keep things up to date. Right or wrong, the impression is still there, and what's worse, HP did it to themselves. I can only hope that by bringing attention to it, maybe they'll change direction, and, to quote Mary McCoy, realign themselves with industry best practices. You know, the way Dell, Supermicro, and hell, even Cisco run their server divisions. Until a public announcement and policy change, and a couple years after that, I don't see the comments of HP requires a service contract for any download going away anytime soon. So, all that being said, from the home lab standpoint, would I still buy an HP ProLiant server? Yes, I still would, as long as you fall into the following use case. You are either A, having all of your services internally facing, or B, you're not leasing out any virtual machine space to anyone else. Every service that I run on my internal servers is internal only. I have no webhooks anywhere exposed. If you're a small or medium business, maybe look towards Dell or Supermicro with a modern BIOS, because this one is still vulnerable to Spectre and Meltdown. The server in front of me was sent over by eSISO, so huge thanks to them for making the review and HP policy exploration possible. While I wasn't able to upgrade the BIOS in the HP DL80 Gen 9 without a contract, I was able to upgrade the ILO4 system to the latest firmware, complete with an HTML5 remote console, kicking Java to the curb. If you're interested in picking up this server, or many other like it, go check out the eSISO store over on eBay. Link is down in the video description. On your way down there, make sure to drop this video a like and subscribe to Craft Computing if you haven't done so already. Follow me on Twitter at Craft Computing to keep up with daily shenanigans like this. And if you like the content you see on this channel and want to help support me in what I do, consider joining the Patreon or Float Plane. Links are also down in the video description. Thank you all so much for watching this one, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys. All right. You can sit right there. Here, buddy. Yeah, I was afraid of that. You're a dick. I couldn't think of a better beer for today's video than Anchorage's Beyond Repair, a 6.4% double dry hopped IPA with Riwaka hops. 6.4%. I can smell the citrus from here. This one is not nearly as complex as some of the more recent Anchorages that I've drank. I've had the Beyond Repair before, but this one is definitely toned down just a little bit. It is still on the hazier side of IPAs, and can I just say, should we just rename the hazy IPA to the Anchorage IPA, because holy crap, they are some of the best. I know you have the Alchemist, which kind of created the entire hazy craze about 5 years too early, but this is just good. Sweet, citrusy, kind of smooth and refreshing. Just a little bit of that hazy acid bite, but this one is definitely not on the intense side of things. This is like the tourist trap Mai Tai, and what I mean by that is when you go to Hawaii or any other tropical location and you order a Mai Tai, what you usually expect is a lot of orange juice, a lot of pineapple juice, and a lot of rum and sugar. A regular Mai Tai is usually lime juice or jatte and a whole lot of rum with a float of 151 on top, so it's a completely different drink than what the tourist trap Mai Tai is. This is the tourist trap Mai Tai, and there's nothing wrong with it.